Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here and welcome to my pre-release guide to Dohn Mheg, the level 73 dungeon coming with Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. This information is coming to you from the North American media tour that I recently attended, and as such, all you see here is subject to change. Whether that be boss mechanics or damage values, it may not be the same by the time launch comes around. I know, kinda silly to make a guide on something that could change, but figure I can dust myself off since it's been a while, and also better to have some idea than no idea at all going in, right? With that, we'll put a little watermark at the bottom and let's get started. This dungeon is broken up into 3 bosses with trash in between. To skip to a specific boss, please use the timestamps in the description of the video. Dohn Mheg is a fairly large dungeon and the mobs hit quite hard, especially at the beginning of the dungeon. I was pretty surprised and I wonder if it's something that's going to be carrying through for the other dungeons in this expansion. For the first several packs, there will be enemies you want to look out for. Pack number 1 has a Dawnfast Fouth channeling a damage buff onto another enemy. You can interrupt that tether before it finishes casting, so have your tanks or ranged DPS do that. There will also be Dawnfast Baskets in a couple of the pulls, which have a powerful tank buster called Straight Punch that you should stun or mitigate, as well as an AoE poison to avoid, and the dot is quite strong. The final pull before the boss will have one of each of these 2 mobs, and the third pull also has a different enemy, a Moth, that just hits a bit harder and has a tank buster as well. Again, I was surprised at how much damage these mobs deal on these pulls, so you may not want to do wall to wall if it's your first time. Especially don't do that if you're with complete strangers. After the 4th pack, you're on to boss number 1. The first boss is Ankhthon. He has a tank buster called Candy Cane that you should mitigate, as well as Hydrofall AoEs that you should avoid. His main mechanic is Laughing Leap. The boss uses this on a set rotation, and when he does, jumps to the middle of the room before casting Land's Blood over and over again. Every tick of this does a few thousand damage, and it gradually summons geysers out of the ground. After a geyser appears, it explodes 2 Land's Bloods later, gushing with water right before it will explode. Being hit by one of these does high damage, knocks you up, and stuns you. Make sure to stand away from gushing geysers as they appear. If you're doing this dungeon with trusts, they will avoid these, so keep an eye on them, and it should help you understand how to safely avoid this mechanic. Also, if you're doing this with trusts, the healing trust will not heal during the Land's Blood spam as they are dodging, so really try to avoid taking hits and use anything defensively that you can. After the first Land's Blood, Ankhthon will begin summoning more and more Hydra Balls and start casting a split damage AoE on the group. Split the damage, dodge the AoEs, and you're good to go. The trash before boss number 2 does still hit pretty hard, and it does come with a few AoEs to avoid. The one that gets people is the trees. They do a conal AoE that can be pretty hard to see past their heads, so be wary of those. Other than that, it's a bunch of plants, insects, and animals, and they're enemies you've seen before. Get through the 4 packs and push on to boss number 2. Boss number 2 is Grial. He is an instant tank buster and occasionally faces player to cast a conal AoE called Swinge. Similar to previous instances of this attack because it's been used before, just avoid it. As Grial loses health, he uses Fodder to summon 5 painted saplings that all tether to him. You'll want your party to intercept 4 of the 5 tethers, as once they expire, all tethered targets begin growing, which is a stacking damage buff. Now if you're doing this with trusts, they are going to respond to the tethers very late, which means you kinda gotta wait till all 3 of them pick a tether before you can actually grab a 4th one. If you let Grial have too many of these stacks, his AoE Timber will become too much to handle, especially since he does 2 of them in a row when he's following up with Fodder. After 2 stacks of growing, the player will become fully grown, but you must still intercept any tether that Grial summons. Grial takes 5 stacks to become fully grown, and if that happens, it's gonna be a bad time. After every double Timber, Grial uses Coiling Ivy, binding all players in a painted root. You must destroy these roots in order to intercept more tethers or to avoid Swinge, so kill them off ASAP. It really helps if players are close to the boss for AoEs to make quick work of these. So long as Grial doesn't get too many stacks and you heal through Timber, the fight shouldn't be so bad. The trash leading up to the final boss isn't too unique. Kelpies have a hard-hitting tank buster and some AoEs, and the Naiads have some AoEs that you can just avoid, but nothing too rough. Finish up the few bits of trash and then move on to the final boss. The final boss is Ankhthon, the Lake Lord. It's the first boss again, but he got a makeover and some new tricks up his sleeve. His tank buster is Crippling Blow, and his generic AoE is Virtuosic Capriccio, which also places a bleed on all party members. Best to just heal through it instead of casting Asuna 4 times. He also has Imp Choir, which will turn players into imps if they are looking at him when the cast finishes, and finally, he will occasionally turn to face a player and do Toad Choir, a large conal AoE that turns any player hit into a frog. This has no AoE indicator, so it's recommended players stay close to the boss and move to his flanks when he turns to cast this. His big attack is Finale, which pushes all players to one side of the arena while Anchthon goes to the other. He then cuts out the floor between the two of you, with only a thin path remaining. Players must navigate this path without falling and make it to the other side. Once there, step inside the charging circle and kill the target to stop him from finishing the cast. At this part, pay close attention to any trust that you might have, as you'll notice some pretty funny behaviors from them. Don't worry, they do the mechanic. If you do fall, it just teleports you back to the top and you'll have another chance to cross the path. After Finale, Anchthon will occasionally begin using Changeling's Fantasia to become a Shade of Fear. Now, I didn't see if he can become anything else, but the first one always turned him into a Shade of Fear. I don't know if he'll just become this again if he uses the Fantasia again. This mimics the third boss of the Void Arc. Dodge AoEs, don't stand near the tentacles when they are raised, and don't stand in front of him when he is casting Corrosive Bile. After a few skills, Anchthon will turn back into his original form, with the only real difference being that he will use Virtuosa Capriccio several times back to back when he uses it. It's quite a bit of damage, so watch out. So long as the damage doesn't kill you, all should be fine. That's going to be a wrap for my pre-release guide to Dohn Mheg. Really dig this dungeon and hope to see some good quality out of the other dungeons when we get to play them on January 28th or July 2nd, whichever you want to wait for. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and check out all the other videos coming with my embargo drop from the North American Media Tour. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, take care.